Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Live with Search Engine Land. This one's special in particular because, well, it happens on the second day of SMX Next. I did my keynote for content marketing earlier today, so we thought it would be appropriate to talk more about content specifically. Let's get moving on to some real introductions. We're going to go in alphabetical order, starting with your first name. So, Carol, you're up, and then we're going to go with Heather. Carol, you care to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, something you care about professionally, and maybe something you care about just personally?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm Carol Tice from the Make a Living Writing blog and the Freelance Writers Den learning and support community. And I spent about 20 years before starting my blog and my business online interviewing business owners and covering business scandals and bankruptcies and things, and operating ethically and treating people well in my business has been a really big value of mine. And most of my staff has been with me for many, many years. We don't have a lot of turnover. And we have done karaoke together. We've gone boating together. I've brought them all to Seattle. I like to, we have a real work hard, play hard, and enjoy each other's company. And I kind of have a Costco pay philosophy. And so that's probably me professionally. And just, staying on mission of helping the most writers to earn more as fast as I can. And personally, have been involved for many years with many social justice issues. I have been involved in immigration, detention, protests, and I tutor refugee kids at my library, and hope we'll get to do it again sometime, and help them get into good colleges. And I have really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Carol. I feel like those things are definitely something that are coming to the forefront now more than ever, even though they were always there in the background. It's something that we definitely need to be conscious of moving forward. Moving right along, Heather.
Hey, everyone. And am I echoing to everyone else, or am I? Oh, I seem to be good. Okay. My name is Heather Lloyd Martin. I have been in this world forever. So since before Google was a search engine, back when we optimized for Alta Vista. And even back then, what I was talking about was SEO copywriting. Back then, we called it writing for search engines. And it's been fun to watch the SEO community and the SEO writing community evolve since that time. We've come a long way in 20 some odd years. So professionally, what I'm really into, and for those of you guys who have seen me before, you know that I really love teaching people how to write really good SEO content. One of the challenges is that there's a lot of misconceptions of what SEO writing is. So I love to bust through those and help that light bulb moment turn on so they can see that, hey, what I want to do of creating really good content meshes with what Google wants too. So that's my big professional passion that I have kept all this time. And personally, I've worked a lot with women's issues in the past, with sexual assault, sexual harassment, and I've since then changed that a little bit to where I'm still working with women's groups, but I'm also teaching them how to be entrepreneurs and how they can learn how to make enough money to where not only are they taking care of what they need, but also that they can live a fantastic life and invest and have a seat at the table and do all the things that they want to do, including take time off, which seems like such an amazing concept right now to do, but eventually we'll be able to do it. So it's been a very fun ride, and I'm very happy to be here today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Heather. Empowerment. I love it. It always makes me think of, what if those resources were available for my mother? My mother was a single parent from when I was like 14 onward. Wow. But moving right along there, Jessica.
Hey, everyone. It sounds like Carol and Heather and I are kind of in the same sort of circle. I know Heather and I did a session on LinkedIn SEO at one point, and she's been someone I've looked up to for a while. So I'm not quite a veteran in the space. I've been doing this for about 4 years, but my background was actually in psychology. And I got a entry-level position doing SEO. And I just sort of realized that my passion was really about content writing specifically. So like Heather, I kind of like to talk about what it means to create really high quality, engaging content, not just content that's, you know, stuffed full of keywords and stuff like that. So my SEO content agency is relatively small, but we work with big companies that are looking for that higher quality content. And so in that, I've hired writers to join my team, and I'm also passionate about mentoring aspiring writers. So I recently created my own course for freelance writers on how to, you know, launch their own businesses. So that's probably something more personal that I am passionate about at the moment. And beyond that, I also like to partner with nonprofits that are also looking to up their marketing. So recently I partnered with actually a neighborhood guy who has community gardens and farmers markets across Columbus, helping them with their website marketing and SEO. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. I'm kind of losing my voice because of allergies. It's not COVID, don't worry. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that. But thank you for having me here.
That's awesome. I noticed you did the vampire cough there. That's what I call it.
No, I've always done that. My mom will like slap me if I don't cough in my hands and stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
and Mel, let's hear from you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mal Carson. No need to adjust your computers. I am actually from England. This accent, it's not from Australia. Certainly not. I have been, like Heather, here since the dark ages of Alta Vista. I actually started 20 years ago this year at LookSmart, which used to be the search engine for Alta Vista. It used to be the top paid links. Not paid links from an SEO perspective, from a PPC perspective. I was one of the founding launch members of Ad Center, Microsoft Ad Center, now Bing Ads. I was there at Microsoft for 7 years as their digital marketing evangelist, a forerunner of Christy Olson, who you all know from Microsoft. Left in 2012, started Delightful Communications, and we're a B2B technology marketing agency. We work a lot with Microsoft and actually Facebook and Intel and other technology companies, helping their brands and their leaders be more discoverable, shareable, and memorable. I very much care about my team. We've been growing the company. We're now at 15 strong around the world. And on a personal level, I care about, as I was saying earlier during the kind of pre-event chit-chat, my wife and I are very lucky to become guardians of a wildlife sanctuary out here on the Olympic Peninsula near Seattle. And during lockdown, with the lack of traffic and the lack of noise and all that kind of stuff, it's been really wonderful with my kids here to be able to see. I think we've spotted 41 different species of birds. We've had beavers, we've had bobcats, we've had otters, we've had coyotes, deer, the rabbits, the whole kind of shebang. And that's just been one of the positives of the whole COVID crisis for us, just to see how much nature's come out from underneath everything, kind of going, oh, those dang humans, they've left now we can carry on with our lives. So really, that's me in a nutshell. I'm really thrilled and excited to be here.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, so we're going to start with a really general question, and it might seem obvious, but since you're all experts, I figure you might provide more nuance than people generally think about when I ask this question or when they think of the answer. It's probably really clear why you need to have really capable content writers for publishers and for your audiences. What are the benefits of prioritizing your relationship with them, though? What benefits are there? So I want to, let's direct this at Mel, who spoke last, and then anybody else who wants to speak. Hopefully we're knocking over each other and I don't have to institute some sort of like nose on your finger or hand raise thing. But let's start with Mel.
Well, where we work in B2B and tech, it does tend to be quite specialized, and so there are a lot fewer, we find, writers that understand and run the full gamut of technology, not just from the whole business side of things, business decision makers, business transformation, digital transformation, all the way down to a lot of the technical writing that we need, that's more specific to software and hardware. Because if people are experts in software and hardware, then maybe they wouldn't be too happy with the kind of salary or hourly rate that a writer might get, they would actually be a software developer and actually doing that kind of thing. So it's very difficult to find those people, but when we do find them, we do prioritize them and try and develop those relationships and make sure that that they're kind of trained well and influenced well and mentored well for our needs and our clients' needs, but all the way down to almost having them as part of the team. I mean, we have in-house writers, but also freelancers that we literally treat like family, and get involved with team meetings and make sure that the fun stuff and the gift baskets and the holiday, the holiday presents and the birthdays and all that kind of stuff are recognized, and that we celebrate and we're transparent about the success that their writing has. If they're ghostwriting for other people, we're very transparent about kind of the metrics and the success of the work that we do. Simply because at Delightful we have a principle of people, not just pixels. We believe that people are at the heart of everything that we do, and even in B2B, people are still buying from people, and so we try and run that full circle round, from our writers through to our strategists, through to the client, and then back round, and with that whole feedback loop. So it's hugely important to develop and maintain those relationships in a really human way.
People, not just pixels. Just roll right
like
off
that.
the tongue. That's some good branding. I like it. Would anybody like to add to that?
I would like to say something. So I first got started as a freelance writer, and now I can say that I'm an agency owner. So I can see the perspective as someone who's been contracted to write for agencies, and then also someone who partners with agencies as well as hires writers. And one of the biggest struggles that at least my clientele has is inconsistency. And so when you're working, with a lot of different freelancers, what happens is you're kind of piecing different voices together. And if they're not sticking with you for the long term, a lot of times the kind of brand identity gets lost if that's not effectively communicated. So, in our process, we have like an onboarding questionnaire that's actually pretty in-depth to understand the ins and outs of the brand, who their target audience is, the tone that they're going for, and stuff like that, which a lot of agencies or companies might not be able to have and hand off to writers consistently if they don't have those brand guidelines. So if you're onboarding, a new writer every couple of months, and you're trying to brief them on your brand and get that, communicate what your brand represents, who your audience is, what happens is your content can get sort of fragmented, for lack of a better word. So you don't have a consistent brand voice across platforms. You see kind of varying levels of, explanation in your content. So you have one writer writing at one level and another writer writing at a different level. And that's one of the bigger pain points that our clientele has, is that they're not able to keep writers for the long term. And so they're kind of having to, debrief their writers on their brand guidelines, which may or may not exist at that point. And so it kind of dilutes like the overall brand identity. And for these bigger companies, that's really important because they're highly visible across a lot of different platforms. And if they're inconsistent, it's just their content is not going to resonate with the right audience in the right way. So I think that was answering that question. Now I got distracted what the original question was. Yeah, Heather.
That's oh, go ahead, Heather.
Well, and what Jessica says is true, right? So if you have a number of writers and they all have different voices and they all have different styles and they all have different definitions of what SEO writing means, then you're going to get these really funky, choppy results that doesn't keep the brand voice. But, bottom line of why are writers important to a website? And that is because they're the ones that make you money. They're the ones that are creating the content that is helping Google position a page, that is helping to entertain or inform your buyer as he or she goes through the buyer's journey. That content is what helps that person convert and actually makes you money. So it's always interesting to me when companies will spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on a site build, And then they say, well, we only want to spend about $30 a page to write these sales pages because, we've already spent all this money on the site. And although I appreciate that they wanted to have a lot of pretty things in their site, they're looking at it in a completely back-asswards way. The writers help make money. Those are the folks that you should, as much as possible, groom and train and give them everything they need, because every dollar that you put into that is going to come back to your company in profits. And Carol, I know that you're going to have stuff to say about this too.
Yeah, I was stopped at the point where they said, and it's hard to hang on to the writers. And I was just thinking, you might consider paying them a living wage as an idea
Exactly.
for hanging on to them. And honestly, what I'm seeing out there is bigger companies are not only paying a lot, are putting writers on big retainers.
Yep.
Excuse me. They want to make sure they are locking down really good talent. I am seeing freelance writers that I coach getting full-time job offers from their freelance clients. Like when they get someone who gets their brand and is delivering with content, I see a lot of nervousness out there right now about hanging on to those people.
Yeah.
Because while you may hear that there's a mass unemployment and whatever, good copywriters and good content writers are not that easy to find, especially if you are on an arcane topic that not every writer, it's not parenting or pets or something, it's advanced washing machine technology or surety bonds, say, two things I have both actually written about. And, they're desperate for people who get it. And yeah, they want to try and make sure they're going to have that consistency, because otherwise, yeah, it's just a choppy mess.
Absolutely. And, when you have a client, like I used to work for an agency, and we worked with everyone ranging from like Northrop Grumman to WordPress. And when you have somebody that writes for an entity like Northrop that specializes in science and, defense weaponry, it's very niche knowledge, and you do what you can to keep a hold of them. Which brings me actually to this segue. Thank you very much. I wanted to direct this at you, Carol. What are the biggest challenges that freelance writers have with dealing with clients? It's really important to keep these experts on board and writing for you. And so how can you avoid these sort of pitfalls in the relationship?
Where do I begin?
There's
so, I want to say a lot of it is starting these days with the first client meeting. Whole lot of clients out there wanting to take first client meetings where they just really don't know what they want. They've got no project on the table. They're like, oh, I don't know. We have a lot of priorities. We don't really know. And that leaves the writer thinking, why am I here exactly? Unless you're trying to milk me for some free consulting about how to do your marketing, and then you're not going to hire me. And it sort of starts everything off in a bad way. I personally don't take first client meetings anymore unless there is a defined project we are coming to discuss. And letter, but from there, just I feel like all down the line it's lack of clarity. It's I don't really know what I'm looking for. Why don't you write something and then I'll see if I like it. I think people who have the best client relationships with writers who love them and want to keep working with them have a lot of clarity in their process, and they're well organized and good communicators. They're not crazy boundary pushers who are like, what's your instant messenger address? I want to be able to send you messages 24/7. All of that crazy. Oh yeah, that's totally a thing that happens out there. Or they just can't make up their mind on topics. It's like they have you write it one way, you write it the other way. They have you put it back the first way. They don't really know what they want. It's like if you can sit down and say, what is the goal of this content that we are about to create? Why are we all here? What are we hoping to accomplish? Okay, so from there, let's break down what are the types of content we should create around that message? What gives it variety, and what key phrases do we need to go after here? And we kind of come up with a plan. There's just a millions of businesses out there doing content because they've heard they should do content. They don't have a content strategy. They don't have a content strategist. They don't have a content calendar. It's just kind of really on the fly. And I think if that's your scene, think about hiring the writer to be a content strategist, and just stop pretending you're coming up with it, and give it to someone who will come up with it and go, okay, here's a game plan. What do you think? And the more you have that kind of clarity, the more the writer can go, okay, I need to develop 8 topics for you this month. Here's what they are, or you're giving them to me. I want to say the other number one stumbling block I'm seeing right now is people who say, I'm going to give you the topics, writer. We will come up with the topics and we will give them to you. And then what I hear from the writer is, I am sitting around waiting for topics and they're not showing up. Should have been here 2 weeks ago. Jessica's like, totally, yeah, and then the content calendar starts to all slip, and soon this project is going to fail because it can't stay on a schedule. The content isn't going to persist. So I think there's a lot of companies with a fantasy going that they're going to manage their own strategy that they should like get serious about with themselves. Heather's like, word.
Yep.
And go, wow, we are not having time to do this, and we should hire someone who could maybe do the content and do the strategy, or do the strategy and manage the writers and make sure this really happens the way we need it to.
I would completely back up Carol for everything that she's saying. And to take it a step forward to the SEO side of the street, I've heard from a lot of freelancers, and I've had the same thing happen to myself, where the company that they're not in the SEO world, it's not what they do, they see it as a money-saving thing, says, don't worry, we'll provide the key phrases. And so the writer is then told to use the word like travel and expect that that's going to position, or these really funky exact match terms where the client says, and I need you to include this exact match like cashmere sweaters women's 15 times in the copy for us to accept the assignment from you. That is the guidelines we're giving you. And to Carol's point, if your company is not SEO, if that's not where you're at with the content strategy, if you don't have anyone in-house that's doing that, that's when you want to use that expertise and find someone who can. Because the downside for the freelancer is, if we receive something and we're told we have to optimize for the term travel, and we're not working with a huge travel company, we know that when that doesn't work, it's not going to be the client saying, my bad, I gave you the wrong key phrases. It's going to be our fault because they think that we wrote the copy incorrectly. So if you're talking about how to retain and work with really good writers, is to know what your own limitations are. And if you know that that's not your world, yes, that's when you hire the strategist. That's when you hire someone who can train. That's when you bring in some expertise, so you do get the results that you want. And when you're spending that money, you're getting the ROI you want on that content too.
Yeah, it helps if people are visiting reality land about what can be achieved on ranking for a world like travel.
Yes.
It's like people who want to hire PR people, and they're like, you will get me on the cover of Forbes. That's the assignment. Exactly, that's not going to happen. I actually vetted Ozzy Osbourne for that, and they passed. They were like, yeah, we don't guarantee the cover to anybody. We don't care who you are. So it's like an unrealistic expectations problem.
This all takes me back. Now all the memories of editing for my clients back in the day are rushing in. And I just wanted to add this one little thing that we saw. We had a client that had volume of something like 30 articles, about 300 words in length per month, but their publishing cadence was only twice a week. So eventually we built up a backlog where they could publish every day for 2 years if we had just stopped working with them. And that from the agency perspective, it wasn't a big deal. But what we saw was with our writers, they were kind of decreasing in motivation because things that they would write would just trickle out so slowly over time that their morale was just kind of like, well, I do this and it makes me money, but I don't really know where it goes or what's happening in the interim. I found that to be also very hard to communicate with them as well. Before we move on I wanted to ask about the vetting process. Jessica, Mel, did you have anything to add to that?
Vetting process.
No, I know about the previous question about like any other large challenges that freelancers have with dealing with them.
Yeah, so like I said, I got started as a freelancer, and that's part of like what Carol was saying with why I evolved into taking on a more strategist role, was because I had a lot of clients or potential clients being like, this is the goal that we want, but that's all that we know. we don't know how to get there necessarily, but we're going to give you some topics we think are worth writing about. And because I had the SEO background, I'm like, no, that's not how this is going to work. But a regular, writer is not necessarily going to know that. So fortunately, I had the understanding. I'm like Heather was saying with the travel keyword, I'm like, that is not something that you could realistically rank for, given what your site is about, or the competition level or anything like that. And so I just naturally started taking on that role and charging for it. But a lot of clients don't have that direction, right? They have this idea of what they want to do in terms of ranking, but unless they have a real strategy in place, you're kind of relying on your writer to do a lot of this heavy lifting when they're not really equipped to do that. They're equipped to write content, but they might not be equipped to actually structure the content, to determine the topics worth writing about, find those keywords. They might not even have tools to do that. So it's kind of like you're basically having them assume two different roles, and probably paying them a relatively low rate to handle one of them. And so just having really clear expectations, having an actual strategy will help both of you. And also in terms of, I think Carol was saying, I'm sorry, I don't remember the word that you used, but basically feeling kind of, no, actually, George, you were saying it. Not having the connection of what's happening with the content and not being able to kind of keep up with the cadence and stuff like that. If the topics are sort of lagging behind, writers cannot pay their bills on that inconsistency, and they're going to look for clients that can deliver those topics on time in a consistent basis and also plan ahead. So for all the writers at our agency, whether they're writing for us or for a client, they know weeks in advance what topics they're going to be writing for. They have an outline for each of those, and they're never kind of waiting around where's my work? So that's super important, just from a writing perspective, but also the strategy perspective. Things can get backlogged, and then you're just not seeing the results that you expect to see from your content because your calendar's all out of whack. So
yeah, I mean, the big picture of this, for if you want to hire a writer, a freelance writer who's really successful and really gets content and SEO, they're earning 100, 150K. And pretty quickly in your career, you catch on to the reality that you only want to be working on successful projects. You want projects you can brag on that have results and metrics you can show. And when someone says to you, I want to rank for travel, they're going to say, I'm not interested. If they see there's total chaos, there's no content strategy, topics are lagging, they're just going to be out. You can't really hang on to a really talented content writer unless you have your act together and you have a plan that looks feasible, that looks winnable, because we're looking to fill our portfolios with wins that we were part of. If I'm in a content project and it just goes nowhere and then it kind of peters out and ends, I didn't get a portfolio piece there either. So we're trying to build a foundation that gets us better and better clients. So we're looking for the people who have that, where it's okay, this could succeed and be really great, and so I want to be in it.
Thank you very much for bringing that up, because everybody wants that win, and definitely, the best writers will find a way to rise to the top. But when you are getting something off the ground, it's not always apparent who those best writers are. And that was a huge problem I had trying to manage the content that I was editing. When we tried to onboard new writers, their samples looked great. When I spoke to them on the phone, because I insisted on doing that, they sounded great. And then when they submitted something, I wanted to stab my eyeballs out with needles. And I was like, where is my vetting process going wrong? I was a much younger man then. I'm probably not any better at vetting right now. Don't let anyone say it. But hopefully, Mel, can you tell us about what your vetting process is like? How do you go about filtering the right writer for the job?
Well, I mean, I'll get on the phone with them personally. They will submit some examples and some ideas. I mean, I let them know that we're working with some of these bigger tech companies, and they've got on their resume or on their LinkedIn or their website that they've worked in that particular space. And I'm a pretty trusting guy, and we'll give them a stab. But based on the previous question about how to structure things, we're very, very structured with the brief. So it's like, you know, this is the rough title of the article, this is the audience, this is the business decision maker, this is how we want them to feel, this is the takeaway, this is the action. Here are 3 other articles that are very similar to that one. Here's the source material. Go and get on with it. And, you know, if it comes back and it's, you know, 80% there, then, you know, that we've briefed them well, but they've also shown that, you know, they do have the experience necessary. It's those, I think in the early days, what happened with us was we kind of said, can you just kind of go and do that because you're the writer and you know what we need. And then, you know, 20 hours later, this horrible thing would come back and we'd be like, no, and that was it. I think there was I think it takes 2 to tango. It was very important for us to provide that structure and that guidance of exactly what we wanted, and for them to be true and honest with us. The ones that really in our when we have the conversations that, you know, are a little bit self-effacing, or well, I haven't quite written about machine learning, I've done AI. They're the ones that I think, now this is somebody that you know, can be coached and mentored to learn that other stuff, because they already know half of it. They just need to you know, dive deep in some of the other content and become good at that. And, you know, we don't expect them to get it 1000% right straight out of the gate, and that's why we, you know, these are relationships that we work on over time, and a lot of them have worked out really, really well. In fact, on Monday we've hired one of our freelance writers that we had for 2 years as a full-time employee, actually poached her from another agency, which we're very happy about.
George, to circle back to your question of like, the samples look great, you get the writer, they do the writing, it's garbage. I think that's commoner in the like, I'm trying to get content for $50 a post kind of stuff. And the secret to it is to ask them to give you raw drafts instead of once you see their samples, you're like, that's well, could you send me the draft you turned in about that, so that you start to see it before the editing process? Because yeah, some people sort of, their editor does the magic, and that would expose that. So just a tip is, yeah, on the lower end, you get people who are rewritten a lot by their editors. So, and then it's hard to tell.
That's a pro tip. I love it. I love it. Anybody else with any insights on the vetting process?
Yeah, I would recommend for sure that when you start working with someone, and I like to now start people off on a trial basis. And what I've realized is that even if I have a very green writer who might be new to everything, needs a lot of training, and I'm down with that, I'm okay with that. If they can't handle edits or constructive criticism, and they start kicking back on things. Now, kicking back can be like, hey, Heather, I see this a different way. That's okay. That kind of dialogue is great. If I hear you're wrong, I'm not going to do that, I ignore this edit because of, for whatever reason, then that I know that that's not somebody that I can work with, because in my head, they're not trainable for my firm. They might be perfect somewhere else. They might be perfect for their own work, but I need someone that I can have that collaborative relationship with, because especially if they're new, that's how they learn. And that's me spending that time in to teach them. So that's the other pro tip, is that if you start hearing that initial kickback, especially at the beginning, it's like getting into a new relationship. Don't expect it's going to get better a year in. It's not. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And then you feel guilty because you let this go for so long. And now it's time to fire them.
Yeah, it's like, I call that syndrome, my words, my precious words. Like, people get married to their words, even though we're writing this totally in service of a client, and you shouldn't in any way be married to it. And it should be totally collaborative and about me learning from you how to make you thrilled with your copy. And there's kind of 2 categories of writers: people who enjoy that challenge of pleasing a client and fall in love with the jigsaw puzzle that is taking the way I write and what you want and everything and creating something that we both love. And other people who are just like, oh, I don't like this editor, they give me a lot of changes, you know. And that's just like, go write your novel, you know. That's where you should be, you know, go write your blog of your own, but it's not like, you shouldn't be doing this for pay. And I that's actually one of the things I tell people to do if they're thinking about becoming a freelance writer. I say, go write for a client and see if you can stand it when they tell you to change it. Because if you can't, this isn't for you. you know.
I love your impersonations. And I just wanted to address the audience here. It has become abundantly clear that we're not going to get through this laundry list of questions by the time this session ends, which is going to be roughly around 5 o'clock to honor everybody else's time. But I do highly suggest that if you have any questions, please do put it in the chat, and I'll try my best to find a way. Maybe I'll email you all later and get those questions answered, and I can put it up in the syndication article or something like that. So please do feel free to leave questions. Now, we talked about vetting, but let's move actually a step back. Maybe I should have asked this first, but in terms of sourcing writers, sometimes you have to get a program up off the ground and you don't have any connections in that industry. Maybe you don't know anyone. Where do you go to look for those writers? Heather, do you have an answer for us?
Yes. So if a lot of times you see referrals, a lot of referrals happen. They'll come to someone like me or to someone like Karen or Carol or someone like Jessica and say, I need someone that can help me with this. And so that is a really great way to do it, because when they come to someone like us for referral, we have an idea of who we can send folks to. There's always the folks that say, hey, you can just put an ad out on Craigslist or on LinkedIn. And you can, but you're going to get a flood of people who may not fit exactly what you want. So tapping into your resources first, finding out who they've worked with, did they hit deadlines, get a feel for who's out there, and then working at it from that angle.
I don't know what's happened in my chat. It's like gone away, but I don't. What have I done wrong? Anyway, I want to say, rather than putting an ad on LinkedIn or an ad anywhere, it's like you're going to get 500 responses. You want to look through 500 people's portfolios and stop asking writers for resumes, please, whoever you are. Like, I don't know how that relates to hiring us, but a lot of online job ads ask for them. But go on LinkedIn and do a targeted search under people for the exact type of writer you need. You need a Atlanta fine writer. You need a, give it 3 about freelance. Put the word freelance in, like I need a freelance Seattle technology writer. And what LinkedIn will return you is the people you're connected to. Your connections will rank at the top. So it's a way of kind of doing the referral network, but in a bigger lens. Or you can pick an elite board. Pick a board that doesn't have a huge audience so you don't get overwhelmed, but has a lot of working writers. I run one. I'm trying to leave the URL, but I can't find my chat anymore. I don't know what I did wrong. But if you go to freelancewritersden.com/hire-a-writer with dashes, you get a job board that's free to list on. Our members pay to belong to the community. And it's like 1,400 members. So that sort of thing, if you have a professional association that maybe has a little board, or if there's a small board you can go on so you don't get like completely blown out and overwhelmed. I think that's a way to go.
I was also going to say LinkedIn and Facebook groups, and it kind of touches on the last question too, that I look for writers that are really showing up online. Maybe this is just more of a preference, right? Like there's some writers that just prefer to kind of stay behind the scenes, but the ones that I have had the best experiences with have been the ones that really take initiative, like in working with me, and that tends to kind of show up when they're showing up online and posting their own content and posting on their blog. They have reviews on their LinkedIn or recommendations on their LinkedIn. They probably have a business Facebook page. So they're just a lot more visible, I think, than your average writer. It kind of just gives me a better sense of their personality and the fact that they love writing if they're creating their own content. So just for me, I've had the best results finding writers that way. And those are people who are very active in the Facebook groups. So I'll be on LinkedIn. And so if, like what Heather, I think, was saying, was if you're looking for a particular type of writer, I go to niche Facebook groups and try to find writers that way. And I'll be very specific about what I'm looking for, want to see their examples and their website. And to me, if they're very active, they've branded themselves professionally on either Facebook or LinkedIn, then to me, that's a good sign. And then you kind of have a chat with them and they seem very personable and have like good communication skills. Those are the ones that have been the best for me, and they tend to stick around because they really love what they're doing, and they're also invested in the success of your clients or whatever project that you're working on. So it kind of lets them give like have a little free reign because you trust it. They enjoy what they're doing. They enjoy the research process. And so for me, those are the two places that I look to, Facebook and LinkedIn, and then looking for writers that are really like a brand in themselves as being professional and are creating their own content.
That's the high end. That's the high end.
Very
I
high
agree
end.
on I agree on the specificity in research for this session. I just went onto Twitter to see, would there be any B2B technology freelance writers on Twitter, and they've all got. There was 5 or 6 of them have all got it in their Twitter bio, which I thought was great. But then also to Jessica's point, being very specific, we've asked for referrals from other people, and we don't say, look, I'm on the hunt for a freelance writer. I'm after somebody with B2B experience that knows machine learning, has a 30-foot technical knowledge of the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, and who has experience of writing for a developer audience, but also a business development audience. And then that kind of, then you don't get 500 resumes or CVs or folks coming through. Just that specificity, if that's the word, really helps. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Words. I know that it feels like we just got the ball rolling on this conversation, and I'm sure I'll follow up with all of you. But unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up. But I did want to offer you all just this chance to tell all of our listeners, both the ones that are here live and the ones that will be watching this later, if you had to walk away from this with any additional information, any other tips that we haven't talked about, is there anything that you would tell them? Let's go around in alphabetical order again, if that's okay with everyone. Carol?
No pressure. What would I like to tell them? I'm sorry, say the question again.
Any just like last parting tips, and if you want, you can totally pass the buck on to Heather, and we'll come back.
I can take it.
I want to go last. Yeah, I went last time.
Yeah, I would take it. I've written on this a few times because I'm really passionate about, helping writers see success. And so I'm kind of trying to equip agencies with the right process in hiring writers. So to me, it's having a really good brief and a really good either SOP or set of brand guidelines to hand over to a writer. I have those for my own agency, and I am a content writer. So I have like a list, like SOPs for how to structure content, for SEO specifically. Every piece of content still goes through me, but I still have sort of a step-by-step process for that. I have brand guidelines for every single client that comes my way. So if you are a brand, having some sort of brand guidelines and understanding of who your target audience is. So your writer is equipped to write for that particular audience, structure content the way that you want it to be structured. And basically, you're giving them like all the tools they need to be successful. So that's what I would say. Also having a really good onboarding process. If you are an agency, asking your client those questions. Who's your target audience? What's the goal of this content? That sort of stuff I think Carol was also mentioning. So you have an actual strategy for them rather than just handing a topic over to a writer and be like, here you go. That's what I would say. That was a lot all in one soundbite, but.
Well, it all goes back to giving them a sense of purpose, just like you give any of your in-house employees as well, right? Anybody else want to volunteer?
Yeah, I would say we've talked a lot about working with freelancers, right? But there's a lot of folks that have their writers in-house. They might have a dedicated Marcom team, or it might be kind of a patchwork of the engineers write a little bit, and then this department writes a little bit more. What I would recommend, it's something that I talked a little bit about before, is that if you're not getting the results that you want, if you're writing a lot of content, you're still not seeing the positions, you don't know why, that is when it pays to bring someone in that can help you untangle that. Because the more you keep going and produce content that's not positioning, that's going to be frustrating to the writers, it's going to hurt the bottom line, and it's going to make people think that the SEO stuff just doesn't work. when actually I've seen companies that have gotten some sort of level set training take their web traffic from sort of nowhere and just drips and drabs to finally getting positions and traffic that they thought they weren't able to get before. So the more that you can work with those internal writers to give them the skills they want, the more that that's going to come back and make your company money later on.
And I'd
Fantastic.
say, just very quickly, you know, treat your writers like they're part of your full-time team from a cultural
Yes.
perspective, and send them a gift basket or a bottle of wine now and again. I had a writer that been working in the space for 20 years and no one had ever sent her a holiday card or a holiday present from any agency or any brand that she worked with, which I thought was outrageous. So just be kind.
Yeah.
I want to say,
Totally. Go ahead, Carol. Sorry.
I want to say that the big thing out there is that I think there's a lot of writers that are sort of being treated like interchangeable parts, being asked to write kind of low value content. And if that's you and you're not happy with your strategy, think about playing bigger, because if you have a blog, a business blog with no free product for subscribers, you don't have a special report, you've never done an ebook, a long form piece, just understand that like this is a contest online, and that bigger, more in-depth content is really winning. And think about investing in a writer who could really just level you up somewhere that you're not now, because I think at this point, the way Google is regarding longer form content, that's kind of how you win this game. If you never write, I mean, I recently wrote an 8,000 word blog post for my own blog because I had a phrase I wanted to own. And it's like, just understand what it will really take. And it'll take delivering some really quality, highly, highly useful stuff. And think about who you're going to hire that can bring that.
Thank you so much. We've actually gone over by about 6 minutes, but we've retained just about everybody in here this entire time. So thank you all for attending. That's pretty much it for me. Once again, I'm George. Thank you to my panelists, Carol, Heather, Mel, and Jessica. I will get this up on Live with Search Engine Land, and then you'll have something to review and watch it again later. But until next time, take care. And thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, George.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.